Baylor basketball. Uh,
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Guys, I don't know. With Baylor basketball. What I do know is it's the live edition of the Locked On Baylor basketball postgame show, and that I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas. And I do know that I want to thank you guys for making it your first listen today and every day, including your weekend evenings after whatever that was. 76-74. Baylor loses to the 16th place team in the Big 12, a league of 16 teams. Yep. I'm going to visit this throughout the post game, but I do want to know from you guys, this is the worst loss since when? Because there have been some blowout ones that have been pretty difficult to handle, right? Gonzaga, who now barely looks like a tournament team. They lost by 40 this year. There was that rough around the edges Michigan State team that they lost to by 22 last year. But Colorado stinks. Like, they were 1-14 in conference play coming into today. Like, come on, man. What the hell? There's not many teams, not many games that I can see from this team this year and just be like, yeah, that's got to be a win. UCF was one 2 weeks ago, both Utah games. And this one. I don't know. I don't know. In fact, I look at the box score. of this game, and Baylor won a lot of the categories that I like. Like those things where if you dominate your opponent in X category, and X category, and X category, like you're probably going to win the game, right? They shot 88% from the line. They only turned it over 7 times. They were +6 in the turnover differential. They were +12 in points off turnovers. They out-rebounded Colorado. They were +12 on second chance points. They actually got the double digits for bench points, which they never do anymore. They lost that category, but they were +6 in the paint. Like, and they led for 9.5 minutes of the game against the worst team in the Big 12. Colorado shot 49% from the floor. I don't think that was just like a blistering shooting night of like, oh, how can you stop them? I think Baylor had a good hand in that. And I think what we saw in this game, which we see so often from this team, is you have to tell them the whole game that there's 2 minutes left in the game, because that's the only time they give effort. It's the only time, man. And it's really frustrating. Like, it's really frustrating to watch this team just go through the motions for 36, 37, 38 minutes and then throw a shift in and make it interesting. Colorado should be investigated for the last 2 minutes of that game. They should be investigated for throwing a game or point shaving or what. That was the most brain dead 2 minutes of basketball I've ever seen at this level. And still, Baylor was too far behind. They couldn't come back. By the way, Baylor made some boneheaded plays in that span too. They go from the 6.5 minute mark in the second half to the 1 minute mark in the second half without hitting a field goal. How are you supposed to win any game doing that? And how many times do we say that about this team? If they're not getting to the free throw line, they can't friggin' score. They can't do it. There's just no offensive skill whatsoever on this team. Some guys here and there, but overall, they have no direction offensively. Nobody can create their own shot, and I don't think anyone could make it if they could. It's so tough to watch. It's brutal to watch. That 4-hour movie that's going to be up for all those awards tomorrow, The Brutalist, that should be us watching this thing. Because Colorado, the worst team in this conference, did not hit a field goal for the final 5 minutes of the game, and you still couldn't catch them. Like, does that not embarrass anybody else? Like, come on, dude. Colorado. Miracle on Ice 45 years ago today. And the Russians did not start playing enough in that game, and that's what Baylor had today. I'm out of answers. Not that I'm the answers guy anyway, but I try to be on this show. I have no solutions here. This season is done. It's a wash. It's over. Scott Drew's not going to quit on the team like Bill Self does every year, but this season is done. This team is going nowhere. And this is a prime example of why. Just absolutely going through the motions, checking the boxes to lose to Colorado. Like, I'm going to be like that annoying girl who's like, honestly, I'm speechless, and then types out like 5 paragraphs in a row. That's me, because I don't have any answers, but we'll just talk through this. Mainly through the comments. Bear the truth. Bet you didn't have that one as a scheduled loss. I'm telling you, this team is on the bubble by the end of the season. Tell me I'm wrong. Bear, I don't know if I can tell you that you're wrong. Now, I have thought that Baylor's been closer to missing the tournament than the experts have this whole year. Lenardi still had them coming into this game as a 97% chance to make the tournament. Like, this is a bad loss, but it can't drop you that much. So we're just in for your one NCAA tournament game. Maybe VJ puts together a great dunk, or someone dances in the pregame warmup, so we get on the one shining moment compilation at the end of the year. But it sure as heck ain't going to be you at the end of it, man, like it was a couple years ago. Those of us who watch this team night in, night out, and have watched Baylor, like I've watched Baylor basketball for a dozen years now, like pretty intimately. I have seen teams that were barely in the tournament. I've seen teams that are NIT teams, and I've seen teams that have won the national championship. One team that's won the national championship. Like, we know, we've run the gamut here in that time. We know what an NCAA tournament team looks like for Baylor, and this is not what it looks like. Not at all. And maybe that's a sign of how far we've come, that Baylor can coast on the name brand a little bit. But this does not look like an NCAA tournament team, whether they make it in or not. Brad Strickland says road wows. I believe that's supposed to be road woes. Yeah, they don't win on the road, but they've also dropped some home games too. Like, a good Baylor teams would win the, Arizona game at home. Arizona's a better team, but you'd find a way to win something like that. And they're not, and they lost to TCU again at home. So yeah, I mean, you have to win on the road in this league. You have to. But it's a little bit of both. Boston Straw says this team just doesn't care. I would love to argue with you, man. Would love to. But I can't point to something that I've seen in this season and said, no, they care. Look what they did here. Can't do it. Can't do it. Matthew brings up the excuse that I'm sure a lot of people will use for this one. The heart of this team and the depth of this team just doesn't match the altitude of Colorado. Like, sure, they don't have great depth, and Colorado is at altitude. You've already played 2 altitude games this year, so you're not caught off guard by it. But I understand why people would say that there's not enough depth on this team. I think that's A, their own fault, and B, should not prevent you from beating the last place team in the conference. It just shouldn't. Your best players were out there. Jaden Nunn is not one of your best players. Josh O, you've got to go the whole season without him, so it's tough to use that as a huge excuse now. VJ was out there. Norchad Omier was out there. Jeremy Roach was out there. Jalen Celestine was out there. They're not good enough. They're not good enough. Yeah, Chuck brings up a point. Too many missed field goals, especially by Rob Wright. It was a real bad game for Rob Wright. He doesn't have many of them, but he's had a couple here in February. And VJ has hit like 2 field goals or 2 3-pointers this whole month. They've just totally fallen off a cliff. Like, neither was very good today. That's for sure. What did Rob shoot? It was like 3 of 11. 3 of 11. VJ 2 for 9. Langston Love gave you another 17. He was 4 for 11. Roach 4 for 15. Couldn't throw the ball in the ocean from a boat. Dubravcic gets some minutes. I feel for the kid, man. I mean, he's just not ready for this level of basketball. And Baylor had no choice but to put him out there for some of those. And I think my pal Pete talked about it on the broadcast, but it was like when Norchad was out there, they just attacked the hell out of him. He was only a -4 for the game. I'm shocked it was that little. They just went right at him. There was nothing Baylor could do defensively with him. There was no way they could go through him offensively at all. It's not. I hesitate to just blame the kid. He's just not ready for this. Absolutely not ready for this level, and that's where Baylor had to go today. But honestly, that's against Baylor. I was on this show last spring. You know, obviously, I wanted Cliff Amori. I really liked Norchad Omier. That's not a revisionist history. But after that happened, you know, I remember saying, and they had missed out on Jonas Adu as well, saying, like, that's great, but you need another one. You need another big man here. You really do. You're very thin at that position. And even if it's just a depth guy, you know, that I can't remember the kid's name, the raw kid from Kentucky, who I think ended up going to Kansas State. Someone will correct me in the comments, but like just someone like that, someone who can give you a couple minutes and can play power 4 basketball. They didn't get that. They signed a kid from Croatia in July, and this is what you get. This is what you get. You know, that's on Baylor. And all the guys who, I know you didn't have Jaden Nunn today, or Josh O, but all the guys who make $500,000 or more to play for this team were playing today. And they lost to 16th place Colorado. We need not look any further than that, right? What, 3 or 4 guys probably that are making $500,000 or more to play for this team? To play for this team that at best is an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament and can't just, you know, wipe away the worst team in this conference? That's why I'm asking. This is the worst loss since when? My gut tells me it's Texas Southern to start the 2018-19 season, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong in that. Jake asks, what's up with the 3-point shooting? Not good. It's not been good. It's not a forte of this team. It's something that left with John Jacobs. It's out in Boca Raton right now. Having a day on the beach. All right. I know those of us here where I am in Chicago, and certainly you guys down in Waco could use a day at the beach. That's where the 3-point shooting went. Wave to it. Bye, Charlie. Gone. Not a part of this team at all. And they shot 9 of 27 from 3 today. They just jacked up 27 of them. I'm surprised, honestly, that it was only 9 of 27 for 33%, because I think they hit 3 or 4 in a row at one point in the second half. And I was sitting there thinking, hey, maybe they finally had like their game where it comes alive again. Nope. So you take out that stretch and they're putrid. They're horrible, awful. Shouldn't even be shooting that. They shouldn't be shooting 27 threes, not this team. Last year's team, the Jacobs teams, absolutely. But this team, no way. And everyone thinks they're a shooter. Everyone on this team thinks they're a shooter. Rob Wright, 1 for 4. VJ Edgecombe, 0 for 3. Norchad, 0 for 2. Oh, shocking. Asamoah, 0 for 2. They don't have a shooter on this team. They just don't. They don't have 3-point shooters. Green Hoodie asks, how is Jason Asamoah a top 100 recruit? Maybe this is me being the Boston guy here, as was with Jason Asamoah. But, like, I don't know. Sometimes it does. Like, he wasn't a top 10 recruit. So sometimes it does take some time. And by some time, I mean a whole year. But I did think Jason Asamoah was going to step up more with this quote unquote injury crisis. I really did. But sometimes it plays out like that. I think he's like the 6th or 7th, biggest issue here in this rotation on this roster. But I'm not going to say he's out there playing well and that we shouldn't give him any heat, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. And that's been my thoughts kind of the whole conference season here. Samuel Terry asked, BU shot terrible at the tournament in Colorado last year, year before, 2023. Is it conditioning? I don't know, just because I'm not smart enough for that. But I will say this, Samuel, is that whenever these games come up, these altitude games, it gets brought up in these press conferences, usually by Scott. It's brought up how difficult it is to play at altitude. Again, just like this built-in excuse. You can't really use that excuse anymore. You've got 3 teams in your conference that play, at significant altitude. Okay. Like, I don't know. Maybe the ball travels differently at altitude. That could, I'm a comm major, brother. I don't know. But I will say in the conditioning point, they do have their star players get hurt every year, or significant players get hurt every year. So maybe there's something else there. Ryan says it's uniquely one of the worst of the Drew era, given the expectations and having a lottery pick. Yeah, that's the thing that kind of sticks out to me is, like that 18-19 team, they lost to Texas Southern in the the opener, first game of the season. Like, that's no excuse, but at least we didn't have huge expectations for that team. They were an NIT team the year before. This was a top 10 team to start the season. And me, with egg all over my face now, went on Locked On College Basketball with my pal Isaac Shade, and he asked where Baylor's going to finish in the Big 12 this year, and I said first, top 10 preseason. And they still, I guess, by some theory, might not make the tournament, and they just lost to Colorado. Yeah. Bear the Truth also asked, how much of these issues do you contribute to coaching changes? That is part of the story. 4 assistant coaches new to the staff this year, as well as 4 new starters, obviously. But to answer honestly, I don't know how much we can contribute to that in late February. Like, we don't give that same kind of slack to the new starters or to the freshmen at this point in the season. I'm not giving that same kind of slack to coaches. Scott Drew hires great assistants. He has his whole time at Baylor. I don't know who that next guy is, but it's not enough of an excuse for me. I think he had some new guys on that 16-17 staff, and they got to number 1 in the country in January. So, yeah, and Ryan kind of asked off that same question of how much of an impact do you think it's the loss of most of the key assistants since the national championship? I would say that was like a good reflection of why they haven't been able to make it out of the second round the last couple of years. But to fall this far seems like a little much with the talent that you're bringing in. But again, Scott has been great at hiring assistants. He's got to do it again. Like, this is the downside of hiring great assistants. They become head coaches. And yeah, it does feel like certain aspects of Baylor basketball's identity has been lost in the 4 years since the national championship. Even when they've had some really talented teams the last couple of years, since 22, they have not had any kind of grit. They have not been able to play good enough defense to go deep in March. And they've struggled on the road. Now you take out all of their identity since then, which was the high ball screen, good looking offense, well-oiled machine, 3-point shooting. They don't have any of that. Matthew Hudson asked, do you think there's any way that Tang comes back to Baylor and try to jumpstart a successful team with Scott? I mean, if he gets fired at Kansas State, which is unlikely considering the buyout and the way that Kansas State has totally rebounded their season, they're a better team than Baylor right now. Better team, Kansas State. If that were to happen, yeah, I do think he would he would come on board. Where did Mike Boynton go, by the way? The old Oklahoma State coach. If anyone knows that, I guess I could look it up. I'm literally on a computer. His wife loves Waco. I was like, man, Mike Boynton should be on this short list. He ended up somewhere. I just don't remember where. Harris asks, whoa, could Scott Drew be leaving after this year? If so, where did he go? I don't think Baylor's forcing him out the door. If he were to leave, he would go to Indiana. I still doubt that. I doubt he's going to go there. But if we're talking about in May, what happened to Scott Drew? It's probably that he went to Indiana. I don't think there's other jobs that he's out there ready to take. And I don't think Baylor will be firing him or anything like that. But I think, and this is not like, inside source here, you should start looking out for this. This is just me kind of thinking out loud. We've talked about this a little bit on the show, is like assessing the money situation after this year for Baylor basketball, the NIL situation with the revenue sharing, which Baylor will 99% sure opt into, and how they're going to allocate that $20.5 million of the salary cap, if we can call it that. I imagine a lot of it's going to go to football, and I imagine some donors that you've convinced to donate to basketball the last couple of years. We'll see how close Baylor football is to making a significant run towards, a college football playoff or a national championship. Not saying, put your money down on them to win the national championship, but I think people will see that and be ready to allocate that money towards football rather than basketball. So I think this is going to be, whether Baylor's good or not, kind of a year-to-year struggle for them every year. Certainly we know the rumblings of what Scott Drew asked for in NIL money to come back to Baylor, not go to Kentucky, basically asking for, I need all the resources possible. And I love him. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He'll always be the Baylor icon, but I think even he'll tell you he probably dropped the ball on that money this year. They went out and got some guys in the transfer portal and spent some money on these freshmen, and it's not worked out. It's not worked out at all. And that's how you get to losses like today, losing to the worst team in this conference. Anyway, guys, I mean, that's all I've got. I don't even want to say where do they go from here. I mean, we probably know the story. Like, they're going to limp to the end of this. They're going to, lose in the first round in Kansas City. They'll get a bid at 8 or 9. They'll probably lose that game as well in the NCAA tournament. And we'll look back on it and say, well, they just never were healthy. And they played one of the toughest schedules in the country. Kind of comes with the territory with the Big 12, but certainly Scott scheduled tough in the non-con, and that's what we'll be saying. But maybe it's just me being a creature of the moment. I feel like there's more to be concerned about than just the injuries and the schedule. Certainly it gets you some sympathy that you haven't had your desired lineup for most of the year. But by that same token, I think a lot of coaches will tell you, you got to work with it. You look at the guys who are out a significant amount of time, no disrespect to them, but they're not the best player on the team. The two best players on the team are Vijay Edgecombe and Norchad Omier, and they have combined to miss 2 games. So it's not those guys. It's not like a UConn team from last year losing Donovan Clingan for 2 months. Not the case. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Worst loss since ... Finish the sentence down in the comments below. What you think about this team? What you think about the future of this program after this year? Please let me know down in the comments below. Maybe you find something to be optimistic about, and you can definitely let me know that. Guys, if you're watching live or watching after the fact, like the video, guys. It helps out a ton. We're always trying to get to 100 likes on these lives, and it can be work to get there, but that's why we shoot for it. Thank you guys so much for making this your first listen today and every day. Thank you guys so much for making it the #1 spot for Baylor football and basketball postgame. Appreciate the heck out of that. We'll have some more on this on Monday's show. But until then, I don't know. Stay golden. Keep your chin up. If you're a USA hockey and a Baylor basketball fan, it's been a tough week, but we're going to get through this. Baylor baseball is undefeated. Anyway, thank you for making it your first listen today and every day, and we will see you on Monday on Locked On Baylor.